Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, The Criticality of Fleet Safety. I'm Sarah Nicastro, Editor-in-Chief of Field Technologies. Today we're going to be taking a look at some content from a special report that Field Technologies is publishing with its July issue on the topic of fleet safety, why it's important, and what you need to be considering on that topic. I'm going to go through an overview of the content of the report, and then we're going to have a bit of a roundtable discussion followed by an audience Q&A where you guys can ask whatever questions you would like. I'm joined today by Randy Holmes, Director of Business Development at CORE. He's going to talk with us during the roundtable discussion portion about the report content and give some of his insight on the trends that CORE is seeing around the topic of fleet safety. So with that said, let's jump into the content. So first, let's talk a little bit about why fleet safety is an important topic. At Field Technologies, we decided to do a special report on this topic because it's one that sometimes gets overlooked, not because it isn't important, but because there are some myths that exist about fleet safety that can lead a company to thinking it needs to be deprioritized. So let's take a look at what some of those myths are. The first one is thinking that a fleet safety focus is going to take away from efficiency initiatives. Most fleet managers are very, very, very focused on efficiency. It's typically their number one priority. They are driven by a lot of cost reduction pressures, and so they're naturally very focused there. But the reality is that safety and efficiency are in many ways related, and we're going to talk about how that's the case throughout this presentation. It's also totally feasible for you to tackle both your efficiency and your safety initiatives without doing a lot of extra effort or duplicate effort. So that's the first myth. The second one is that there's no real ROI in fleet safety. Again, fleet managers are very focused on ROI metrics, so reducing miles driven, gas used, maximizing driver utilization. But in actuality, there are a number of ways that making safety improvements can have a positive impact on your bottom line. In fact, later on in the presentation today, we're going to take a look at a few examples. We have some information in the presentation on companies that I've interviewed for cover stories with our magazine that have talked with us firsthand about the hard metrics that their safety initiatives have delivered. So we'll be looking at that. Myth number 3 is we don't have time to focus on driver safety. Everyone is stretched really thin in today's day and age. Everyone's dealing with competing priorities, not enough hours in the day. We're all facing those same challenges. But the reality is if you've already invested in or are planning to invest in any sort of fleet management solution, a fleet safety initiative will likely take less time and resources than you might be thinking. And the other reality is that you really have to make time to focus on safety. It's not something you can afford to ignore. So moving along, we're going to talk about some of the costs of feeding into those myths and ignoring fleet safety. It's true that fleet safety is an element of the fleet budget that can be a little more difficult to quantify on the balance sheet than some other areas, but there are still real fleet safety costs that can be uncovered and defined to support and illustrate the need for a fleet safety initiative. So some of those we're going to take a look at. The first is fuel. Reducing fuel costs is always a priority for fleet managers, and one way to do that is through improving safety. Fuel consumption is directly tied to speed and acceleration. So if your drivers are constantly speeding, they're also constantly wasting fuel. In fact, the Department of Energy claims that every 5 miles an hour driven over 50 miles an hour is the equivalent of adding 14 cents in additional costs to every gallon of gas. So keeping driver speed in check can go a long way in reducing fuel costs. The next area is maintenance. While every vehicle obviously is going to need regular maintenance, maintenance costs can skyrocket for vehicles that aren't being properly operated or safely operated. Harsh braking, harsh acceleration, harsh turns, sudden stops, tailgating, and other bad driving habits can affect the life cycle of your vehicle's brakes, oil, transmission, steering, tires, and so on. When a vehicle needs unexpected or more frequent repairs, the other issue you also are going to face is incurring the cost of downtime due to a vehicle that's out of service. Another area to consider is employee and public safety. Unsafe driving does more than just risk material losses. It can lead to injuries or even fatalities. Your employees add a lot of value to your company, and if they're injured in an accident, everyone loses, including your customers. If your driver injures or kills someone during their work, the cost to the victim's family, your driver, and your own peace of mind are incalculable. Liability is another issue. If your vehicles are involved in an accident, you might be the target of legal action or civil lawsuits. In addition to the damage this causes to your brand, the incidents can also cost millions in legal fees and damages, not to mention workers' comp claims. Accidents also have a direct impact on capital expenditures. Depending on the industry, fleet vehicles can cost anywhere from $30,000 to upwards of $100,000, in addition to any equipment or tools or resources that you store inside the vehicle. Even if your insurance covers the cost of a lost vehicle, you may still have to pay some portion of that purchase price. Fleet safety initiatives also protect against theft and loss. Company vehicles are often the target of thieves who either plan to sell the vehicle or its parts, or sometimes steal the tools or other equipment locked inside. And that's another costly problem. Frequent speeding tickets or accidents can also send your insurance premiums through the roof. If the problems are persistent, you might even have difficulty obtaining the level of insurance that you need. Finally, the last thing you need to think about, which is a little bit more of a softer cost, but definitely has an impact, is your company's reputation. If you think about it, your trucks or vans or whatever that your mobile workers are out driving on a day-to-day basis are basically rolling billboards for your business. And so the last thing you want is for one of your drivers to tarnish your reputation by speeding or driving recklessly or aggressively, running red lights, being at fault in an accident. Hundreds of potential customers are seeing your vehicles out and about every day. So unsafe driving can tarnish your brand and their impression of your brand permanently. So having taken a look at the costs of ignoring fleet safety, which hopefully illustrate its importance, let's move on to talk about some of the pillars of a solid fleet safety strategy. A fleet safety program should focus on the safety of your drivers, the safety of the public at large, and the safety of your vehicles, equipment, and other assets. The first key to your safety strategy is appropriately selecting and screening drivers. I know this might seem like common sense, but in several industries, for example, long-haul trucking, there's currently a driver shortage. And so that can, lead to companies feeling pressured to settle for, less than the skills or the background or the experience that you're comfortable with. And in other industries, such as plumbing or HVAC, utilities, the employees that are operating company vehicles aren't hired for their driving skills, but rather their specific trade skills. So regardless of industry, background checks and preliminary driving tests should be part of the hiring process. A study by the American Transportation Research Institute found that if a commercial driver had a previous violation or conviction for driving more than 15 miles an hour over the posted speed limit, the future likelihood of that driver being involved in a crash increased by 67%. So it's important to be taking that into consideration. Driver training is also crucial. You want to make sure that there's a formal process in place so that, each driver is aware of what the company's expectations are when it comes to their behavior behind the wheel. You want that to be very clear to them. You also want to establish formal policies and procedures. You need to have written formal policies that outline your company's expectations about how the vehicles are going to be operated, what qualifies as unauthorized use of the vehicle, and a clear policy regarding how safety violations will be dealt with. There should also be a clear escalation process that outlines what behavior will warrant a warning or a penalty or a suspension or even a dismissal. You also need to consider ongoing management and retraining. The goal of any fleet safety initiative should be to improve the overall driver and fleet performance, not just to penalize drivers when they do something glaringly wrong. The initial response to poor driving behavior should involve a discussion with the driver and retraining. Retraining can include formal driver training and testing to address specific behaviors. And you also want to consider what might be behind the behavior. For instance, a high level of speeding may actually indicate some sort of scheduling or routing problems versus just simple poor decision making on the behalf of the driver. So you want to take into account what might be causing them to have some of those behaviors. Investing in fleet management technology will provide you with the visibility you need to really conquer safety issues and work towards continuous improvement. So those are some of the things you need to be thinking about and defining for your organization when you're coming up with your own fleet safety strategy. So let's dive a little bit deeper into the discussion about fleet management technology and the role that it plays in a fleet safety initiative. Here are some of the ways that the real-time visibility fleet management provides can improve safety. The first is identifying drivers in distress. With real-time fleet monitoring, you're able to more easily identify when a driver might be in distress or in danger and get help to that driver's location more effectively. In many industries, field workers are operating in remote or rural locations, and so a GPS system might be their only means of communication if they do need help. You can also be proactive in checking on the workers if they've been stationary for too long or if the driver can't be contacted. And some solutions even include like a panic button functionality that drivers can utilize to summon first responders if there's an accident or if they find themselves in danger. Fleet management can also help to reduce unauthorized usage of vehicles. You can create geofences to help keep drivers on their assigned routes and to discourage unauthorized use. Geofencing can also improve security by issuing an alert if a vehicle is moved after hours to help deter after-hours use and other unauthorized cases of use. GPS also assists in the recovery of stolen vehicles. So theft might not be an everyday occurrence, but it is a very costly one, right? So it's incredibly expensive in an instance when you can't recover that vehicle. So with GPS, authorities can be notified within minutes of a vehicle being tampered with or stolen, which makes recovery of that vehicle far more likely. Also with fleet management, you can monitor speeding and other driver behaviors through dashboard views and reporting, which helps managers keep tabs on unacceptable driver behaviors such as speeding, hard braking, and so on. And then those managers can take that information to determine which drivers need further training and what that training is going to look like, or if they need reprimanded or any stronger action needs taken. In-cab fleet management tools can provide hands-free navigation functionality that not only helps get your drivers where they need to go on time, but it can also provide alerts that help them avoid heavy traffic, accidents, dangerous conditions, and audible directions, promote the drivers keeping their eyes on the road instead of, trying to look at a map. Some fleet systems can also be configured to give drivers real-time feedback about how they're performing against the company's safety parameters. So this can be in the form of audible alerts that can be provided in the cab of the vehicle, and that gives drivers an opportunity to correct their behavior on the spot in real time instead of that information being relayed to them after the fact and them having to process that and put that into practice after the fact. Also, for fleets that are covered by federal hours of service regulations, Fleet tracking technology can be used to automatically populate driver logs for both hours of service and fuel tax reporting purposes. In addition to helping improve compliance, these solutions can help fleet operators ensure that drivers aren't overtired behind the wheel. And the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, who has mandated electronic logging devices for most commercial fleets to record hours of service data, estimates that in addition to reducing paperwork, this will help prevent 1,844 crashes per year. The reporting and scorecarding functionality that many fleet management solutions provide can help you identify which drivers are having problems and make it easier to target retraining efforts. To that end, it is important that your solution identifies both the vehicle and the driver so that you can effectively monitor and measure safety compliance. Vehicle-centered solutions should require driver identification and logons so that you can more accurately track safety issues based on both the driver of the vehicle and the vehicle itself. The real-time monitoring of driver behavior that fleet management enables and being able to quickly correct issues like persistent speeding can save a significant amount of money on speeding tickets, less accidents, and lower insurance costs. Speaking of insurance costs, the tracking solution helps establish what's called proof of fault in the instance of an accident. So if a driver is involved in an accident, the data generated by a fleet tracking solution can help to prove or show if the driver was properly operating the vehicle. In many cases, insurance carriers will offer a reduction in premium for having certain types of fleet management solutions in place because of this type of validation data. All right. So what we're going to do next is take a look at how a lot of the concepts I just presented and the information I just talked through are being put to use by real-life companies. Again, these are companies that I've interviewed for cover stories in our magazine. So as a side note, if you wanted to take a deeper look at any of these real-world success stories, you can email me and I can send you a full-length article on exactly what these companies are doing and how they picked the solution they did and that sort of thing. The first success story we're going to take a look at is Ecolab. Ecolab is an environmental services company that's based in St. Paul, Minnesota. We spoke specifically with its equipment care division, which has a field force whose technicians perform break fix and preventative maintenance work for its customers. And in the U.S., that division operates a fleet of 520 vehicles. So for the article, we interviewed June Fu, Ecolab's Senior Manager of Sector Strategy and Enterprise Excellence, about the company's fleet management initiatives. Ecolab was looking to improve technician utilization as well as improve vehicle safety. And according to Fu, Ecolab wanted to shift its safety strategy from being reactive to proactive. So instead of waiting for some sort of safety issue to occur and then having to figure out how to deal with it, they wanted to be more proactive about preventing safety issues from occurring. So Ecolab clearly outlined its safety goals and then set out to evaluate fleet management solutions. They worked with the fleet management provider that they chose to set safety targets based on their goals and then design custom reports for the data that they wanted. So they had very specific objectives, and they wanted to find a solution that would allow them to really customize the reporting and the dashboard functionality around the KPIs that they wanted to track and follow. So they successfully deployed that solution, and with the solution in place, the managers at Ecolab are alerted if a driver speeds or drives erratically, and they can address those issues right away. And in the first year of deployment, Ecolab reduced preventable accidents by 26%. Next, we're going to take a look at Chesapeake Energy. Chesapeake Energy is the second largest producer of natural gas in the United States. The company operates more than 19,000 wells across the U.S. and has a fleet of 4,000 trucks that employees use to monitor those sites. So we interviewed Tim Denny, Vice President of Administration at Chesapeake, who talked with us about the fact that they had a solution in place that provided very limited fleet data and that was fairly manual in nature and time-consuming, and that the company wanted to focus on trying to improve fleet safety because it's very important to them, with the nature of their business, that the drivers arrive at the work site safely and then return home safely every night. Chesapeake actually issued an RFP to 10 vendors, and through their evaluation process, they narrowed those down based on scalability and vendor experience. The solution that they ultimately chose enables them to set limits for speeding, hard braking, and acceleration. When drivers exceed those company-defined thresholds, they receive an in-cab alert. So Chesapeake is an example of a company that's using those real-time audible alerts in the cab. Chesapeake uses the system's automated reports to help guide the managers to determine where coaching and retraining activities need to take place. And within the first year of the solution being in use, the number of alerts the system issued to drivers fell by 20%. So they saw some real improvement in behavior as a result of those real-time alerts. The next company we're going to take a look at is Unitech Global Services. Unitech has nearly 100 facilities across North America that provide design, engineering, and maintenance services for a variety of telecom providers. As a third-party service provider for many of its clients, the company is responsible for ensuring its roughly 2,200 service technicians and 2,600 service trucks complete their scheduled service stops on time and in the safest manner possible. For this article, we interviewed Daryl Schulters, Director of Fleet and Facilities at Unitech, who explained that the company had already had a very big focus on safety, but what they were really looking for was a technology and a solution that was going to help the company be more consistent with its safety policies. One of the major goals that Unitech had was to reduce accidents by becoming more proactive, and the way that they looked to do that was to use driver scorecards that they actually use to forecast potential infractions and provide driver safety training before those issues take place. So again, they're not sitting back and waiting for expensive, risky accidents to take place. They're trying to prevent them from happening from the outset. With their solution in place, Unitech receives daily driver safety reports, and when issues arise, both the driver and the manager get real-time alerts. The driver safety data is also used for weekly safety meetings and presented on a monthly basis to senior management. So everyone in the organization is very well aware of and looped into the status of Unitech's safety initiatives. Since their solution has been in place, Unitech has reduced the number of accidents by 30%. And lastly, we're going to take a look at Toshiba Global Commerce Solutions. Toshiba provides point-of-sale hardware, software, and services to retail customers and has a fleet of 350 service vehicles that text drives to service those POS systems in retail customer locations. For this article, we interviewed Joe Bognaski, Executive Director of Global Service Delivery and Planning at Toshiba, who explained that, again, fleet utilization and driver safety were the company's two biggest initiatives. So Toshiba's goal was not to take a punitive approach with drivers, but really to foster the feeling among its workforce that they wanted them to feel like they should treat their vehicle that they're driving on a day-to-day basis as though it's their own. When the company spots a problem with the way a driver is operating, it's up to the field manager to initiate the retraining. So it's done at a field manager level. With their safe driving solution in place, Toshiba was able to take advantage of insurance discounts that were made possible through the ability to generate verifiable driver data and in doing so has reduced its insurance costs by $500,000. So these give you, very real-world look at how some of the companies that we've talked to here at Field Technologies are using, the technology to enable fleet safety, but some of the different ways that they're, putting their fleet safety initiatives to work. So as you are shaping your fleet safety initiative, one major aspect to keep in mind is driver or employee engagement. It's a big deal because without employee buy-in, most of these initiatives are going to struggle, if not fail entirely. The good news is that a lot of times taking a safety-centered approach to fleet management can help with acceptance. So, you're making it about them and their safety versus just you, when you go at it from a perspective of, just cutting costs. That approach can help. But that being said, fleet tracking solutions in general can commonly make drivers uncomfortable because you're essentially taking highly independent workers and suddenly monitoring them 24/7. So, that's something that's needs to be addressed. So how do you foster acceptance? Here's a couple tips. First, you want to clearly articulate the reasoning for the technology being used. And in doing so, be clear about the benefits to the drivers themselves. So these can be direct. For example, rewards for safe driving or incentives for safe driving, and also indirect. So just explaining how some of the operational efficiency gains are going to, improve the business overall and long-term provide a better or longer working environment for the drivers. You want to involve and educate drivers early on. You don't want to wait until you're rolling out a safety program or a fleet management solution to tell them about it. The earlier you loop them in, the more they feel like they're a part of the project versus it being something that's happening to them. You want to make sure you have an open line of communication with your drivers. You want to be clear in communicating with them, but you also want to give them plenty of opportunity to ask questions, provide feedback, voice concerns. And you have to keep in mind that different employees are going to be comfortable doing that in different ways. So a multi-channel approach is best. Give them an opportunity to ask questions in face-to-face meetings. Give them an email address they can use or a person they can contact via email with questions. Maybe you have an online form or forum where they can ask questions. Just keep in mind that different employees are going to be comfortable with different methods, but the goal is that they all feel like they have a voice. Make sure you develop clear written policies around the initiative and be consistent in enforcing them. Drivers should know exactly what to expect from the solution and what the company expects from them. Be consistent with what you measure and how you report that data. You want to take advantage of any and all coachable moments. So a lot of drivers, they might not even be aware of some of their poor driving habits. So having that data on hand is great, but you want to make sure you're taking advantage of all of the opportunities you have to teach them and train them along the way. You also might want to consider establishing incentive programs. So a reward or incentive program is a great way to encourage compliance with the solution. And also to make drivers' efforts feel appreciated. So that's something to consider. And those programs typically, help with producing results from the solution overall. And you always want to be asking for feedback from the beginning when you first introduce the concept to them, through the rollout as you're putting everything in place, and even after the fact on an ongoing basis. You always want to be asking them what they think and really listening to what they're saying to determine if there are areas of opportunity to improve on what you're doing. So now I'm going to be joined by Randy Holmes, Director of Business Development at CORE. I'm going to turn it over to Randy. Randy, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do at CORE?
Sure. Thank you very much, Sarah. My name is Randy Holmes, and I'm Director of Business Development at CORE Wireless. I have been in the telematics industry for about 10 years, specifically focusing on connected vehicle and connected vehicle insurance. I built programs with some of the largest insurance companies in the country in both the commercial and private passenger markets. My role at Core Wireless is specifically focused on platform services and looking at telematics platform services for some of the largest telematics customers we have.
Awesome, great. It's good to have you with us, Randy. So now Randy and I are going to have a bit of a conversation about some of the content that I just presented and get Randy's take on some of it. So Randy, first question for you. Core is a connectivity company. So what perspective do you feel Core can provide on the topic of fleet safety?
Sure. Core is the largest independent provider of IoT connectivity in the world. Founded in 2003, we have well over 6 million connections. This being said, fleet tracking and telematics is the most mature market in the IoT space. We currently have over 1,100 partners in the market, as well as over 2.2 million vehicles connected. Those are fleet vehicles. So this diverse portfolio allows us a unique perspective into fleet tracking, as well as insights and trends both domestically and nationally. Not only do we provide connectivity services with all the major carriers in the U.S., but 110 countries around the world. We work with a lot of companies and partners that are bringing solutions from other markets into the domestic market here in the United States. And we work with them to get their devices through PTCRB, FCC, and other carrier certifications. So we have a lot of visibility into new devices entering the market, as well as best practices in the industry.
All right, great. So in your experience, what are some of the best practices that you can share for successfully deploying a fleet tracking solution? And have you seen any companies make avoidable mistakes in the process that you would want to make our audience today aware of?
Sure. I think a lot of what we see is a rapid change in the industry. We're seeing a major shift as we see 2G devices sunsetting with one of the major carriers at the end of the year. We see some companies elect to keep those 2G devices active through other carriers, as well as try to extend the life of those devices. We're also seeing this as an opportunity for a lot of companies to upgrade their hardware, moving to either 3G or LTE devices, which have the longest runway in the industry currently. We're also seeing a lot of flexibility as people look to adding new devices, and new devices are entering the market. The ability to select and pick the right carrier or carriers in the market is something Core is very familiar with.
Okay, good. Can you elaborate a little bit on how a strong safety program coupled with the deployment of IoT devices can substantially reduce costs?
Sure. What we're seeing now is an increase in the insurance telematics programs that large insurance carriers in the U.S. are introducing. This is something that I'm very familiar with, and watching some of these large insurance carriers expand and reach into the connected vehicle space and try to leverage the content and information delivered from these in-cab solutions. Many of these carriers are looking to understand how a vehicle is being driven, when it's being driven, and how it's being driven in order to offer discounts for that greater understanding. Many of the companies we're looking at, and we've talked with some of these large insurance providers, and as well as the one you cited in your program, these discounts can be substantial for programs that are already in existence, with a lot of companies who are using it for efficiency models as well as driver safety programs. Leveraging that data can be of great benefit and actually increase the ROI from a program like this.
Okay, good. So last question, Randy, is, given your position in the connectivity and platform industries, what trends have you seen in regards to leveraging IoT for fleet management and safety?
Sure. In looking at the industry, we're seeing a lot of changes occurring, and this is coming about partially through the decrease in data cost. So we're seeing lowered reporting intervals. So companies who used to report every 15 minutes, we're seeing much more granular data capture and this information being transferred back. We're seeing devices such as, let's say, in-cab training increasing. We're seeing the opportunity to add on-the-fly routing and dispatching as something that is new to the market. As we look at these kind of companies, we're seeing lone worker safety devices, which you mentioned earlier. We're seeing that in some of our international markets becoming of increasing interest, as well as driver security. And the security side is more of the asset protection and monitoring. So whether it's a cold chain monitoring or we're seeing public safety companies looking at nearest responder closest to arrive. We're seeing more and more diverse applications in the industry. And as we see these diverse applications, we notice companies having a greater demand for both services as well as devices they're integrating onto the network.
Okay, great. Awesome. Randy, I appreciate your insight. And now we are going to dive into questions from the audience. So feel free to type in your questions. We have a few here that we're going to start going through. So the first question is asking, what criteria should I use to select a fleet management solution? So the way I would answer that, we produce a special report every December that is based off of a survey we do of the Field Technologies audience. And we actually ask, those folks what criteria they're using to select the technologies they're using, what's most important to them. So I can tell you how our audience answers that question, which is the first thing people are looking for is ease of use, a solution that can be easily integrated with other, back office systems and solutions that it needs to share information with. Something that is, easy for management to use in terms of viewing reports, pulling reports, that sort of thing. Something that's easy for the drivers to use, something that isn't cumbersome or confusing or anything like that. So ease of use is the number one. Number two is reporting functionality. So, just again, the way the data is presented, people are looking often at what are the standard reports that the solution creates, and then also, what other type of reporting can be done on a more custom basis, that sort of thing. And then the third criteria is the ability to customize. So, that's where, some of the examples I mentioned, like with Toshiba, and their case study, they had very specific metrics that they wanted to track. So for them, they wanted the ability to, have more custom reporting and custom dashboards instead of just out-of-the-box functionality. So a lot of folks are looking for that type of functionality as well. So those are a few things I would mention as far as criteria you can use to select the best solution. Randy, we have a question here for you asking about, you're talking about IoT solutions. So can you talk about the security aspect of IoT solutions? Like, how secure is an IoT solution?
Yes, thank you. That's a great question. We see that question come up many times. We can be integrated through both public and private network, VPN, and et cetera. We use, and that's up to the customer's regulation and data sensitivity for the data they're passing back and forth. So that is something that we are acutely aware of, and this question pops up every day from our customers.
Okay. So the next question is asking, so the case studies that I presented within the presentation are all very large companies. So is fleet safety really only a focus for very large companies? The answer to that is no. I think sometimes the larger companies have a better handle on it right now. You know, it's something that they've just sort of gotten to already, where, you know, smaller companies are still, you know, oftentimes in the process of adopting tracking technology and things like that, even for efficiency reasons. But it's definitely something I think a fleet of any size should be focusing on. And like I said at the beginning when I went over those myths, you know, a lot of fleet management solutions are going to have, you know, safety modules or safety reports and functionality built into them. So it's not necessarily something that's going to take significantly more, you know, time or effort or money to put a focus on. It's just a matter of, you know, making it scalable for your business. You know, so maybe you just focus on a couple of very key areas or very key metrics to start, you know, monitoring and trying to improve on. And as you master those, you know, you can kind of roll out a little bit more from there. But certainly, you know, some of the very basic stuff I think is something that any size company should be doing. So Randy, another question for you here is, you know, we talked about the connectivity aspect of things. What are some of the most common issues that companies experience with connectivity, and how would a company solve that problem?
Sure. I think you have two or three things that companies start seeing in this space. One is needs and devices are constantly changing, whether it's through acquisition or consolidation in the industry. Many companies are required to support multiple types of devices in multiple industries. So the ability to have some sort of common platform is something which we are seeing from our standpoint as something that's becoming more and more critical. The ability to right-size devices for the market, whether it's from a connectivity perspective, a data perspective, or a device perspective. So finding the right device working for that right solution. Many of our customers on our side work with multiple different carriers trying to find the best solution to target that specific market. And one of their needs is to have a common platform which they can control, manage the cost, but also manage how these devices are operated. So I think those are the two big things we see in the industry right now.
Okay. Next question here is asking, what are some common mistakes you see companies make with their fleet initiatives? So I can speak to that. You know, the first thing is to keep in mind that you know, any sort of technology isn't going to be a fix-all, right? It's a tool that's going to provide you more information and a better means to make decisions and make improvements on your business, but it's not going to fix everything for you, you know. So when it comes to safety, I mean, it's going to give you that visibility that will enable you to make improvements, but you're still going to need to be thinking about the process part of things on your own end that you're going to need to do to incorporate that data and ultimately make the changes in your workforce that you need to make. You know, we talked about this already in terms of the driver engagement part of it, but communication is key, and that's really, really important. And, you know, there's been a lot of companies that I've spoken with that have, for one reason or another, overlooked or ignored that part, and ultimately very much regretted it, because you know, people are built to resist things that are new or uncomfortable for them, and so you know, the more you can communicate, the earlier you can communicate with your drivers about what you're doing and why, you know, the better success you're going to have with adoption. Another one is, believe it or not, we've seen a fair amount of companies that don't do a pilot. They might be rushing towards deployment, or they might feel like, based on their vendor evaluation process, they have enough information. But we do see companies that skip the pilot and regret that. So that's maybe not a common mistake, but definitely a mistake. And so you learn a lot during a pilot that can help you really streamline the full-scale rollout. So that's something that you never want to skip. And the last thing I would say is just, you want to start in a consumable chunk and then build out from there, but you don't want to have too narrow of a view of what your technology can do. So most of today's fleet management solutions are, pretty robust in what they can do, and a lot of companies underutilize them. They're really, only focused on this one certain aspect, and they roll the solution out, and they, get comfortable with how they're measuring that certain aspect, and then they just kind of go on with their lives, when really there's a lot of different aspects to that solution that they could be taking advantage of as well. So make sure you're working with your vendor to really understand the full functionality of the solution and the different ways that you could be maximizing your investment with it. That would be my input. Randy, another question for you here is around future-proofing. So how can a company future-proof when investing in fleet management technology for fleet safety?
So I think there are probably two ways or three ways. One is to understand the device that you're picking and what type of network it's operating on, making sure that you're planning ahead for depending on how long a life you're expecting this device to have. As I mentioned earlier, we see 2G devices sunsetting in certain markets in the world. 2G devices are still active and going strong. Another thing to look at is the platform you're operating on. Many of the customers that we deal with do not want to be a telematics service provider. They actually want to operate their business in an efficient, as smoothly and as efficiently as they can. So they actually don't want to be telematics service providers. These people, these individuals, these companies want the answers, and they want to be able to control their fleet in a very efficient manner. So we're looking at many different companies having or anticipating controlling multiple different devices on multiple different networks, and many of our customers operate multiple places all over the world. So looking at the platform you're sitting on and how you're operating that platform, as well as the device, trying to future-proof and allow growth, anticipated growth with your devices.
Got it. Okay, good. Good. We are out of time for today. So Randy, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insight. We appreciate that. Everyone in the audience, thank you so much for joining us for today's presentation and for your time. Hope everyone has a great rest of the day.